Welcome to episode 5, and we're going to examine more stuff in excruciating detail. Yay! Time to go. Now, the lighthouse is a thematic location, but it's not played up as much as it should be. It doesn't end up feeling central. Now, you can argue that the lighthouse represents Chloe. If you see her without her hat on, she's got blue hair at the fringes, but up atop it's red, which sort of represents a lighthouse on top of an ocean.
Isn't this awesome sauce? Totally reminds me of when we were kids. Come on, Slowpoke! Hold on.
I haven't been here in forever. So why do I feel like I was just here?
Because you hallucinate a lot.
This is the exact same path I was on during my nightmare today.
So it is nice to see this path in a different time of day.
You and me.
But there's really nothing... This particular lighthouse isn't terribly interesting to me, and neither is the path. The thing that really matters about this scene is that we're chasing Chloe. And you know how I said there are always stages where you're going to be moving through the level. You're going to be going from point A to point B. And there's really nothing else happening. The question is what you're going to do with those
Chloe's
times.
step douche better not cause me trouble.
You want to leverage any moment that you can in your game to try and make your game better. And sometimes that's something like, if a villain is going to shoot the hero's friend, like, say, Nathan in the bathroom with Chloe, you can let that turn into some dialogue first and get some more development in there, because you can leverage that tension. Similarly, you can leverage the lack of tension in a walking scene like this by explicitly highlighting it and making it part of the character growth. In this case, we are pursuing Chloe, but we're doing it at our own pace and in this really idyllic situation, and we know that she's happy to wait for us. And Warren got his face punched in.
Birds are so lucky, they can always escape.
So this view is really great. And I'll be honest, if the flash forward had, at the very beginning of the game, had started with this view and then the hurricane had just appeared, I would have been very impressed in comparison. Because this view really does feel real, since there's no tension failure here. There's no weird tension dynamics. It just feels really, really nice, and it fits in well with the idea of walking. The cairns, I don't think they're ever explicitly mentioned, but they pop up in some weird places, and there might be some kind of subplot that I missed involving. I just really like how this looks. It just looks... So this is where Chloe and I get a little bit serious about our future and our past. And once again, we're sitting next to each other, facing out to the sunset. Where your characters face is an important part of how your conversations are going to be construed. Obviously, which kind of game you're building will limit your options. If you're building a visual novel, characters aren't going to be doing terribly much blocking in terms of which direction they're looking. But if you can get away with it, you should think about where your characters are facing and how they're arranged relative to each other. If they are, for example, if I were to stay standing here this whole conversation, then that would have a very different sort of meaning than if I sat next to her. So always think about how you can block your conversations to make them more interesting.
Have a seat, Pete.
You're in a good mood.
Seeing my step dork get played makes me happy.
I'm not as brave as you.
David.
And David is indeed
That was his name.
a step douche.
I'm sorry you had to experience it firsthand.
You have to live with him. Has he always been this way?
Ever since my desperate mom dragged his ass to our home.
This is
I never
obviously more conversation to build the story of the characters, but we're actually learning more about David here than we are about Chloe, and we're also learning about Chloe's mom. It's just being framed in a way that makes sense for this particular conversation. It's basically a conversation exposition. Exposition is unavoidable, and you gotta try and integrate it as well as possible into more meaningful conversations like this one.
He freaked out on poor Kate Marsh today.
I know her. She's cool. Only that prick would bully her.
Yeah, you do know Kate Marsh, but yeah, she's not cool.
Rambo still thinks he's gathering enemy intelligence. Did you take a peek?
Well, yeah, I couldn't help it.
Never change. What did you find?
Creepy photos of Kate Marsh. Other Blackwell students.
This dude takes his job too seriously. He still thinks he's at war or something.
Well, let's
He's a
talk about the
total
camera
surveillance
framing here.
fetish.
That camera framing is quite nice. They obviously spent a lot of time moving the camera around.
Chloe, your house is
Small
under surveillance.
dings and
What are you
dents
talking
in
about?
exactly what
There are
happened
cameras
when
all
in
over
the
the
conversation
house.
are
I saw it
less
on the alarm
important
in the
than
garage.
I knew it.
talking about the
He's so
overall
fucking
framing
paranoid.
and the way that the camera tries to
I'll
make
keep
this
this a secret
conversation
from
more
her.
interesting by zooming
Sometimes
around all
ignorance
sorts
is
of places.
No wonder I'm so miserable.
Varying your shots is
Everybody
an
in this
easy
town knows
tool to
everybody's
use,
secrets.
and it can add a lot to your conversations and to the tension involved. It's better to block it if you can. It's better to have the characters actually move and the situation to slowly change and for there to be tension involved somehow.
Even yours?
Not anymore.
So what do you have on Nathan?
He's an elite asshole who sells bad shit cut with laxative.
Now,
Dose me
both
with
of our
something.
characters in this case are facing into the sun, and both of our faces are lit quite brightly, as opposed to the half-shadowed appearances we had until now.
Just tell me what
Now,
happened.
normally I would say that represents the
I was an idiot.
opening up of these characters. Visually speaking, there's more light on their
You know
faces,
money that bad?
Actually,
at least
yes.
on hers.
I had a big
But
time.
I'm not sure that was on purpose. I think it might have just been a happy coincidence. Either way, you can always play with light to try and make your characters feel more in tune with what their conversation is.
How much do you owe?
$3 grand plus interest. And before I could get a chunk of that from Nathan, he dosed my drink with some shit.
God, Chloe.
So here's where we find out that Nathan really is just a flat-out villain.
Dude,
He drugs women and then tries to rape them. So,
And that perv was smiling.
Chloe didn't fall prey to it because Chloe is kind of a badass.
Everything was a blur. I tried to kick him in the balls and broke a lamp. Nathan freaked, so I managed to bum rush the door and get the hell out. Max, it was insane.
I am so furious, I can't even speak. What did you do then?
I figured I would make him pay me.
Now, the thing I like about these conversations with Chloe is that Max is uniformly genuine. She never has any poser moments, or very rarely has any poser moments where she tries to impress Chloe. You're talking from the heart almost all of the time, and that's a big change from how she interacts with everyone else. The small disingenuities you might be able to pull off with Chloe they pale in comparison to literally everything you ever say to anyone else. So it's good to see that they have a genuine relationship in a game which is largely about how Max creates non-genuine relationships.
He's still dangerous, Chloe. Not just to you.
That's an
Oh, good thing
understatement.
you notified the principal. I feel safer already.
I won't always be there to save you.
Yes, you
Ruined me
will.
today, Max. You saved me. I'm still tripping on that. Seeing you after all these years feels like...
Destiny?
A little bit of blocking here.
If this is destiny, I hope we can find Rachel. I miss her, Max. This shit pit has taken away everyone I've ever loved.
This is very well
To
framed.
drop a bomb on Arcadia.
You can learn a lot about how to frame your characters by watching movies, especially over melodramatic ones. But how much this can be applied to games, it's hard to say, just due to the fact that most games aren't just cutscenes. Most games have a little bit of walking around, a little bit of chaos, and it can be very hard to frame and block out things when you have any kind of variability. Anyway, we're back to the storm. Now this time it feels a little bit better in terms of the cut not being quite as nasty, but it would have been really great if when we had fallen into the storm, into this nightmare, we had been looking out over the sunset and then bam, now it is suddenly a hurricane. That would have been great. It would have been a really good use of the jagged edge of the cutscene, jagged edge of the I died. It would have been a good use of the jagged edge of the cutaway without losing any continuity, because we've established that we are in this place already and we already know that things are going to go wrong. It would have been really nice to see that happen, to use that potential. So my basic philosophy is, if you have something that that is going to be tense, you know, a sharp tension climb, you should try and use that to create as much connection to your world and your characters as you can, because those giant tension spikes are the things that are going to remain in the player's mind the longest. Whether those tension spikes are something like a gun being pointed at someone's chest, or whether they're spikes like a sudden cutaway to a storm that you're stuck in. Those are all tension spikes that can be used to drive your story forward a little bit more, to drive your characters forward a little bit more. They don't have to exist on their own as a single object. You can integrate them into your... You can integrate them into your overall flow, and you can use them to try and set up a little bit of extra motivation. They are your batteries, they are your power, and you want to use them as effectively as possible. Now, obviously, we were led up here by a phantom deer. The phantom deer is our quote-unquote spirit animal. And the reason they thought we needed to be led up to this newspaper is because it's really hard to see. It's not a giant beacon, but I'm not sure it was necessary. I think they probably could have thought of some other way to do it. The spirit animal is another superfluous... The spirit animal is another superfluous... Spirit animal is another unneeded theme. Comes up a couple of times. It's not central enough to feel good, to feel important. It just feels like a distraction. You don't need 100 themes. You need like 1 or 2.
Is this Friday? That's only 4 days away.
Now we see the song coming in the background there.
The tornado is headed straight for the town.
So, although the tension is very high, we are prepping for the tension fall with that song. There we go.
You're here. I'm back. Oh my lord, this is real. It's real. Oh man, this sucks.
Max, what's going on? You totally blacked out.
I didn't black out. I had another vision. The town is going to get wiped out by a tornado.
So, they tried to take the edge off of that cutaway by bringing in the song so that you could tell that something was going to change. And I think it worked pretty well.
Come on, take a breath, okay?
Now that the song is here, we're getting an even warmer, redder glow.
Something hardcore.
And you might think that that's sort of talking about the fact that there's destruction happening or whatever, but I'm pretty sure it's the fact that you are confiding in your friend, and they're trying to make that feel super warm and connecting, you know?
Yeah, sure.
I saw you get shot, Chloe. Saw you actually die. I was able to go back and hit the fire alarm.
Okay, I see you're a geek now with a great imagination, but this isn't anime or a video game. People
Now
don't
notice
have
that
those
a lot of these
powers.
camera
It's like
shots are
you're
showing
like
the wrong face, the non-talking face.
Scared shitless.
That's often a very good call if you have this kind of adaptable 3D camera. If you show the reaction, then in many cases you can show that what's being said is more important to the person hearing it than the person saying it, or at least that their perspective is more important.
Max, start from the beginning. Tell me
Now, the
everything.
snow represents, the snow pushes Chloe into accepting that we might not be full of shit. The snow is one of the problems I have with our plot, but I do like this whole set of panning shots that shows us all these places that we haven't seen yet, and some people that we haven't seen yet, but they're all going to come up over the course of the game. It's a very good way to do it, because it feels very soft and inviting. And at the same time, it also reminds us that there are lots of things that need to be done and fixed. Obviously, this is the end of the first episode of the game. And we're getting a summary of all the people we've met and all the people we're going to meet. And it's all done to the sound of this song, which is a very... It's a tight looping song. It's basically just the same refrain said over and over again. And that fits this sort of situation very, very well. And everyone's day is winding down. Now, you probably noticed that Nathan was playing with a camera and not a gun. And you won't know anything about these for quite a while. Oh, right, I forgot. They actually tell you the various things that other people did. Your choices throughout the chapters are saved, but very few of them ever matter. The closest they come to mattering is this, when you get to see what choices other people made. And some of the choices are pretty asymmetric, and a lot of the times that's specifically because of screw-ups in the pacing or theming of the missions, of the whole overall chapter. For example, comforting Victoria is super popular because everyone realizes that Max is really quite horrible to her. And similarly, intervening to help out Kate, I think that most people do that because they think that they're going to get to keep the photo. They don't, though. On the other hand, over here, this is a very well-balanced one, and I really liked this set of options. Obviously, blaming Chloe is very unpopular because who would do that? But I guess some people like to play Sith, about 1%. So it's interesting to see these laid out, and we can compare them. It's not just a matter of comparing ourselves to other people. It's also a matter of trying to figure out how the game led us into those choices, and whether or not the game could have balanced those choices better simply by framing them slightly differently. In the case of whether or not we noticed there was something to do, or in the case of whether or not we thought that something was good or bad. So, I don't think that has any particular reason to put in other games. It's just worth noting because it's pretty important to this game. Whether or not your average first-person shooter or RPG will have this sort of mechanic, probably not. Still, point of interest. That is the end. Episode 1. Or, as we like to call it, Episode 5. In the next episode of this analysis, we'll start on Episode 2 of Life is Strange.